Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Dogcast. This is the DevOps webinar by North American DevOps Group. Today is Tuesday, March 21st, 2024, and we're going to be kicking off our bi-weekly webinar series called the NADOG Days of Summer. I am Jim Schild. I'm the founder and head of community at NADOG, and with me is my co-host, my co-XB, my partner in crime, my partner in whiskey, as we talked about earlier, and longtime friend, Brian Dawson. So Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. And by the way, XB means we were ex-members of the Cloud Bees Hive together. I'm not his ex-boo, for instance, but great to meet everybody. Brian Dawson been, practicing on what I'd say multiple sides of DevOps for years, and I'm excited to host the show with you, Jim, and get a chance to talk to Venkat.
Thank you.
So, Venkat, welcome. We have with us today Venkat, who is the founder and CEO of DuploCloud. I'm not going to give you much more about him, but today we are going to speak with him about the past and the future of DevOps, and I'm sure we'll slip a little bit of the present of DevOps in there. So, Venkat, glad to have you. Was hoping you could tell us a bit about yourself, right? What is your role today as CEO of DuploCloud and a bit of your background?
Yeah, maybe I can start with my background. So I'm a developer by background. I started my career at Microsoft Research, and that research group went on to become Azure. I was among the first 10, 20, something like that, engineers in Azure. So I had first started by writing the compute stack and was the first engineer in the networking team where we built the SDN controllers. So, I mean, I was there overall Microsoft, I was like 9 years and so on. And Azure, when I started, we had about like 100 odd servers. And by the time I left, I think we had a few million virtual machines across the globe. So
Wow.
it's still with a handful of people managing it. And then across the pond, we had AWS. They were 8 times bigger than us, and they had half the number of people to manage, like one engineer, 50,000 workloads. That was life. I mean, there was no such thing as DevOps. You're a dev, you deal with ops. That was like DevOps. And that is a good segue to what I do now is, after learning how, people in Azure and AWS and so on operate large cloud infrastructure. So I thought that the same level of tooling can be brought to mainstream IT. And that led to founding of DuploCloud in 2018. I left Microsoft in 2013, and then after working for a few startups, Cisco and so on, then 2018, I started DuploCloud. I started by first writing code for a long time. And now, I mean, as a CEO of DuploCloud, sales, customer support, product, I mean, all the standard stuff that a CEO has to do in a Valley startup. That's what I do. You're on mute, Ryan.
You're on mute.
That's impressive. That's amazing. We all kind of watch that race, right?
Yeah.
To be in that group that is the source of Azure, which is honestly so much of the backbone of what Microsoft's able to do today.
Right.
You guys chase down AWS. Great job. That actually leads me to a question that now you can either answer from sort of the dev or CEO side. And that is, what is a dev oops, not a dev ops? Credit to Heidi Gilmore for coining this phrase. What is a dev oops moment that you've experienced in your career, either in the engineer or CEO role, where you screwed up, frankly, but it was an opportunity to learn, to gain new insight and knowledge?
Yeah. Do you mean about the stuff that happened like 15 minutes back? Like 15 days back or 15 minutes back?
Right.
So I know, I mean, it's like this, right? So good and bad. I can't remember like one thing that really was so earth-shattering that it changed anybody's life for worse. Right. I don't think there is any such moment. I mean, sure. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, lots and lots of them. Right. Probably make some mistakes. Maybe we probably don't do certain things the best way every day, but we continue to learn. But I wouldn't say, there's been like, I mean, there's a lot of things I could have done better. For example, I could have like maybe scaled sooner, right? I could have raised money sooner. Maybe, yeah, like those kind of things are there, or maybe there are like certain ways that the product could have been built where I could have started with less things and then added more. Maybe it could have been a little bit more modular and so on. So there are like, I mean, so many things, but I mean, to answer
Endless,
your
yeah.
question, I don't think there's any one like really earth-shattering thing that like I regret every day or anything of that sort. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, fair. No, I actually think that's great because what you call out is we are going to mess up. We are going to make mistakes. It's about continuous learning and moving sort of forward. Again,
Right,
in the
right.
spirit of agile DevOps, one thing we can't do
Yeah,
is completely eradicate mistakes, errors, failures. But what we can do is be prepared to absorb them, learn from them, and go
yeah,
forward. Well,
yeah.
Venkat, thank you. I'm excited. I know Jim has some deep and meaty questions to get into with you, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jim.
Such tough questions, actually. Um,
Yeah.
To jump on to kind of with the theme what you were just talking about, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you got started in this space, not just as a developer, but also when you branched out on your own and really how you started your own DevOps related company.
Right, right. Jim, I mean, I think my story is good, but this was completely accidental, right? So I'll tell you first, like, what is the information that I had? I had a good job. I left Microsoft, joined a startup which was acquired close to $1 billion by Cisco. So in that sense, I had a good life in the sense they were paying me very well and so on, but it was a terribly boring job, right? It was on premises. I had a career which was born in the cloud, and I didn't really want to do on-prem and stuff like that. So but at the same time, I also learned this huge problem wherein like I saw that in public cloud, one engineer, 50,000 workloads, you're a dev, deal with ops. It was a norm, basically, right? Security compliance, we would do it like across the globe, hundreds of data centers, millions of servers in like no time. Whereas when I moved to the Valley, I saw that devs rarely do any ops. They would always like write some code, throw it over the fence, and then like the ops people would pick it up and deploy them. Maybe best case scenario was a CI/CD pipeline where they're allowed to change a new code and then do deployment. Like people call it CI/CD. But anything lower than that, whether it was changing the load balancer or adding a new service, you have to really rely on people. And then secure things like SOC 2, PCI compliance and whatnot was taking like forever. Right. And I started thinking like, why is it that there's such a huge difference between how these big cloud providers work or Microsoft, Amazon, so on, whereas mainstream IT is different. It cannot be that the people are like very differently talented. So then I actually it occurred to me that what took us we took something for granted at Microsoft, which was this huge tools team. They were like 1,000 people tools team, which actually built us a platform, so to speak. You can call it like a DevOps as a service platform or something that would actually go on top of core infrastructure, and that allowed us developers to actually build and operate things on our own. And those guys were not operating for us. They just gave us the platform and they would on an incremental basis make improvements to it. And that was my aha moment. I was like, okay, you know what? I think such a platform can sort of be built into the mainstream IT. So then I thought that, okay, I started as a hobby project. I built a platform. I still was not really an entrepreneur. And I thought, anyways, you know what? Cisco is boring. I mean, the company was great, but my job was boring. So then I thought that, okay, let's actually go and let me find a job, right? So I failed every interview that you can think of. Like I failed Facebook, VMware, Google, Uber, right? And then I just couldn't find a job. And then a friend of mine gave me a job at Zenefits. And then we sort of have this arrangement in which I said, he was my friend in Azure. And I was like, look, you're trying to hire these 7 DevOps people. You don't need to hire that many DevOps people. Why don't you use this platform that I have? And then your engineers could just use this platform and they will be self-service. You are a growing company. You can just support it by 1 DevOps engineer or 2 DevOps engineer, and I'll be one of them. And then we struck this deal, and then they became the first customer to this, so to speak, beta product that I had sort of like built. It was completely accidental. I did that because I couldn't find a job. Then I think that company didn't do so well. And then I'm like, okay, I have to like put food on the table. So let me go and try to find 2 more companies. That was my goal, right? 2 or 3 more companies. So I went to Upworks and I put myself as a DevOps engineer for $18 an hour. And then the idea was like, it was like a click and bait, right? I mean, if that's the right term, right? So the idea was I would actually be able to talk to someone like a really small company and then convince and tell them that, okay, use this platform, but I'll take care of the DevOps, the whole thing. So that sort of like took off. Before that, I tried to sell the software to enterprises. The DevOps team like, I don't want this, basically, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
can
like
imagine.
one guy with a product who's going to believe them. But this thing kind of worked. I got like a few more customers. And then, in the Valley, and I would give this credit to the Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, if you have a product, you are marginally successful, the ecosystem somehow comes and finds you, right? And then I found an advisor. I found like other people to help me out. I found angel investors. And before we knew, we were close to $1 million in ARR. And then we found our first investor. And then there was no looking back after that. And then we just got onto the entrepreneurial track and just became a regular startup after bootstrapping it for about like 3 years. But that's Jim, the journey.
That is an amazing story. And people that Jim knows me, I would love to dig in with you. Hopefully we'll get a chance with more time than I have. I'm still stuck on a great marketing ploy, DevOps engineer for $18 an hour. I'm about to run Google ads that just say DevOps, just so I can get some inbound.
Yeah.
I see Silicon Valley CFOs everywhere getting excited, but I'd like to pull back a quick minute because I failed earlier to ask, can you explain now at the sort of where you are on the other end of that journey, what is it that DuploCloud provides?
Yeah.
And then I'm curious to know who is it primarily servicing? Who are your primary adopters today?
Yeah. So I think in order to tell like what DuploCloud does, I think I'll take a few minutes to explain the problem statement, at least from my perspective. See, when DevOps technically started, and it started with service-oriented architecture in Amazon. Why? Because previously things were very monolith, storage, compute, network. You didn't really have to change many things. I mean, you program an F5 load balancer and you deploy a VM, and by and large, it was done. You just change code. With service-oriented architecture, and especially with Docker and stuff, there were a lot of moving pieces, basically, right? And then you had to configure a lot of things. So the way it started in public cloud like Amazon and all is that I'm a dev, I'm just going to deal with ops. But by the time it came to mainstream IT, it was not that the devs were doing ops. It actually turned the other way around, in which more traditional IT operators, they were trying to learn this new technology called infrastructure as code and then trying to become a dev. So it was more like the operators were trying to become dev, right? So, and HashiCorp really helped them and whatnot. But obviously there was like a huge difference, basically, right? Because one was a very platform-based approach. Here, it was like human beings writing scripts in order to do things based on developer requirements. Devs were not doing ops, basically, right? I mean, that was still a misnomer for the longest time and probably still is. So that was, I think I would say 2015, 2016 and so on. And I think that worked very well till about 2020, 2021 and so on, wherein like at that point of time, or even today, you go to a lot of DevOps team and you ask them, hey, how's your infrastructure? They'll be like, everything is automated, man. It's all done via Terraform. Like, okay, so can a developer just go and deploy a service? Like, oh, no, that's not, they can't do that. They need to cut a ticket to me. And then I'm going to change the Terraform code and I'm going to make the change. Like, but you just said everything is automated, right? So can I send you home, right? And can I cut your team by half? Because technically automation means labor should reduce, right? Like, no, that's not the case. And to credit to them, it's not like they are saying it's not automated. I think what they are saying is that it is automated, but that automation is for my consumption. It's for the consumption of the DevOps engineer. It makes the DevOps engineers go faster. So that is what traditionally the industry was, and automation basically meant infrastructure as code. But now with more and more microservices, things have changed, and now there is an acknowledgement that developers need self-service, basically, right? And they need self-service without having a lot of underlying details. And that's when people like we come in. People are calling it platform engineering. So you could say that DuploCloud is a platform engineering solution, which actually enables developer self-service, where people can go and do their own deployments without actually being a DevOps engineer. And the DevOps engineer can manage, have guardrails and stuff like that, but it enables developer self-service for them to build, operate, and deploy their applications with full security and compliance. And that's where I see the industry going. Today, a lot of people are building in-house platform engineering solutions. You can say that DuploCloud is a out-of-box build versus buy kind of a platform engineering solution.
Awesome.
So thank you for that, Venkat. I love your story, and I was really excited for you to come on and share all this with everybody. I'd love to get your insight too about the technical landscape. Like today, the technical landscape is so much different than it was when we got into this space 20 years ago. Like when I started, I don't even think VMware was around. It was all, everything was on physical servers, right? And I remember when VMs hit the market, and it was a big deal. But then today, things are even more different than that. So I'd love to get your perspective, kind of what the challenges are with the technical landscape today, opposed to kind of what they were yesterday.
Yeah, so one thing that has been happening in the software industry is that we have progressively gone to an as a service model. People have progressively wanted everything as a service, just like you said, right? VMware, Cisco, EMC, Palo Alto, they were sort of like, in some senses, for the backup letter term, they were replaced by an as a service provider called infrastructure as a service. That was AWS, basically, right? So that sort of like happened effectively, right? So AWS became infrastructure as a service. Then over the period of time, I don't think we really were able to make operations as a service. We did a lot of other things like payroll as a service, HR as a service, benefits as a service, and so on. DevOps still did not, and operations still did not catch up so much. It was still, everybody was trying to give point solutions. No one would really directly say that, okay, you know what, I need to basically just make DevOps as a service and effectively put the power in the hands of developers and then go and do that. But what has recent, and even when someone wanted to build an automation, they would basically say, hey, you know what, this is the automation, it will help your DevOps scale more and what. But with the advent of ChatGPT, I think now people are just straight out saying, okay, this is ChatGPT, this is AI, how much labor can I optimize, basically, right? I mean, earlier people would basically sugarcoat things and like, okay, yeah, I'm trying to scale operations, but now like, okay, I'm trying to basically reduce operations more and more. So I think what you would see for going further and further is that, fortunately or unfortunately, we have to upskill the labor, and a lot of this labor is going to get eliminated, whether we like it or not, because nowadays eliminating labors with AI is just fashionable, right? And this is all going to basically get more and more thing, and DevOps and IT and Ops are going to be the first ones that are going to hit. I mean, first is BPOs and call centers, and after BPO call center, it will basically be IT and DevOps.
What about from a developer? So, as you really get me thinking, Jim, with that question and your answer, Venkat, I mean, think about, we're at a time, like sort of when you started on this journey, GitHub didn't really exist in a meaningful adopted form, right? We had moved to centralized version control systems like CVS and Subversion, and everybody either relied on a central team to stand up the SCM, or they had their own local and shared server installations, right? We're now in a world where in a minute I can turn on a source code repository, I can look at other people's code, I can not only begin automatically, committing, issuing pull requests, but I also have, say, GitHub Actions, so I can start to immediately institute a workflow. So it seems to me like we spent a lot of time in a world where true SaaS development tools. Yeah, it sounds great. A few people can use them. All of our needs are so unique that what we really need to do is just build our own, and we need to keep our IP on-prem, right? So I'm seeing a shift significantly in the past maybe 10 years towards saying, we believe in cloud. We believe that SaaS can be done. We believe that we can comfortably store in a lot of organizations, especially startups, our IP in the cloud. Is there, how much of that sort of opening up to new ways of ingesting software, using software, and hosting your IP sort of clears the way for DuploCloud and infrastructure or DevOps in a box?
Right. So I'll explain that. See, at the highest level, everybody wants to do less work and want to get stuff done twice and thrice the speed. Right.
Yeah.
So I think
just the less work part. No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
right.
Sorry.
But people expect things to be done like as fast as they can. Right. Of course, security has to be there and so on. I mean, to some extent, I think that's what in general everybody wants. Right. So now let's look at the DevOps landscape. Right. So if I were to basically describe this in very high level building blocks, the topmost layer, you have the CI/CD, where you have you including the version control, and you have your Jenkins and Harness and Bitbucket and GitLab and so on. That layer now is become as a service, right? I mean, no questions asked. Pretty much like we rarely build out Jenkins workers and like clusters and so on, right? People are like, okay, let me use a self-hosted runner or a GitHub or a GitLab and so on, right? Solve problem. Then came the next thing, the observability stack, right? It's not very common for people to basically go and self-host, like whether it is logging, monitoring, alerting, like Datadog came in, Splunk, Sumo Logic, Signal Effects, and so on. Like that's as a service, right? Then comes the application deployment stack. Kubernetes came as a service, basically, right? Just build out containers. It'll basically orchestrate your load balancers and the DNS name and stuff like that. So you see progressively as the stack is coming down from the top to bottom. Now, if you come below the Kubernetes layer, application deployment layer, wiring together IAM policy, security group, RDS instances, like PEM keys and stuff like that, putting together various different security tools, it's still largely manual, wherein a human being are writing a lot of scripts to basically tie these things together. And what we are trying to say is that I think it is going to come down the stack, and then that's the next layer of evolution. So once you have come down the stack, right? And by the way, the bottom layer, the VPN and the networking, that's already as a service. You have solutions like Aviatrix and so forth, like even probably Palo Alto and stuff do it. But this is the big chunk, which is still largely manual. But once this layer is conquered as a service, and you combine all of them together into a DevOps as a box solution, then DevOps just becomes as a service effectively, right? And it's just a natural evolution process. You can just see, right? I mean, people are coming down the stack.
Yeah, makes sense. Perfect sense. Love the way you described it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Venkat. We've talked a bunch about the past and some about the present here. I'd love to, as we wrap up here in the next 5 minutes. And by the way, we're going to go to Q&A after this next question. I'd love to kind of get your perspective and where you think things are going now in the next 5, 10, 20 plus years. Obviously, with AI emerging so quickly, and all the other things that are coming and going, where do you really see things going in terms of not only building and deploying software, but maintaining software and even developing software?
Right. I think in general, what I want to basically say that, see, overall, more and more things are like, I mean, cars are driving themselves, right? I mean, you sit in a car, you expect the car to basically go and take you somewhere. So in that sense, I think the infrastructure is also going to become more and more, so to speak, goal state driven or intent driven, basically, right? So you build an application. By the way, there's a separate conversation to be had that even software developers are sort of like become application development itself is going to become like using AI and stuff, largely automated, right? So I think in general, the process is that people want stuff to be done a lot more faster. People want stuff to be more self-service. And then that's where we are sort of like going against. Now, I think I'm seeing some questions around in Q&A around staff reduction and stuff. I don't mean to really like focus on staff reduction. All I'm trying to basically say is that things have to get faster. People, the end users have to have more control, and whatever is necessary in order to do that, it has to happen. Now, does AI mean staff reduction automatically? Well, in a lot of cases, it seems to be the case. Maybe people can retool and then they can become users of those tools and so forth. That's possible. But I don't know, whichever way you slice or dice it, the way my simplistic view of looking, if you have automation and the amount of work is largely the same, then something has to give way and that has to be labor. Maybe you don't like reduce staff, right? Maybe you just don't hire more staff, right? And you can get more stuff done with that. But there's going to be a very, very significant impact in this industry because of this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I end up at, just op-ed as we get ready to shift. Look, we've seen this with, as we just talked about, SaaS. As we've talked about with computing, CPU advancements, with the ability to message instantly. Some of us may remember inter-office mail, where you had to send a document, you put it in a little thing and tied it up. I'd say we have all these advancements that have not resulted in a reduction of overall jobs in an organization. I think what ends up happening is a lot of us, especially in tech companies, people that are delivering software, is we're a key dimension we're competing on is speed, right? So as we employ AI, similar to what you said earlier, there are going to be tools to enable us to do twice as many things, 3 times as many things in the same amount of time. Right. And we're going to compete on speed. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I think, as long as the organization has more work, right? I mean, that's also an important thing, right? I mean, if an organization is building only so many applications and they need to make only so many changes, then like you can say that, okay, there is more scale, but I mean, that has to be there. But yeah, I think we will overall get faster and you just have to adjust with the needs of like what is the technology that's available and what is the work that needs to be done, and then sort of like go from there. Like, it's not like today people don't build data centers, right? I mean, people of course build data centers, like massive data centers, but not that many as they used to before, right? I mean, so that's what I'm trying to basically say.
Good. Yeah. Interesting thing. Risk of pushing against time, but you just we'll move into closing in a minute. But you just triggered a thought. When we talk about future, we are seeing a movement more and more of people being concerned with out of control cloud costs, right? And many people are actually moving. They're either doing hybrid cloud, which we knew would always be a place where people live, or they're effectively doing not virtual private clouds, but TPCs, truly private clouds internally, right? Standing up dynamic scalability and provisioning on internal hardware. Do you see that this is also a place where DevOps in a box adds value, or is there any other commentary you have on that movement between on-prem cloud? And
I think it's like this, right? I think I wouldn't like for example, I don't look at private cloud as DIY in any ways, basically, right? I mean, it's just a different vendor, right? I mean, public cloud is provided by Amazon. Getting a GPU in Amazon is both hard and expensive, right? And maybe you can actually get cheaper GPUs in your own data center and then have a private cloud solution or a DevOps in a box and then sort of like go and do that. Or maybe who knows, right? NVIDIA DGX might be cheaper for you, right? And then you might actually just I think end of the day, it comes down to how much money actually you are spending doing things yourself and how much money it is available from another vendor. But to your point, is there applicability of DevOps? For sure. Right? Probably the technology could potentially be slightly different. You maybe need to be more focused on Kubernetes versus like being focused on PaaS services and so forth. But yeah, I think I see hybrid cloud totally as a very viable solution, especially when if you're an AI company and you have to run boatloads of training and modeling and stuff, which today, if you have to run all of it in public cloud, is really expensive. And we ourselves like do a lot of this work, basically, right? Wherein we help customers to provide a seamless single pane of glass between on-prem and public cloud, especially for AI workloads.
Love it. Love it. Well, I'm going to play back as we get ready to close, and I know I got to hand it back over to Jim. What I heard today, Venkat, just looking at my notes is, except for the largest companies that have, big, well-resourced platform ops teams, we're seeing that more often than not, when we talk DevOps, it's oftentimes operations guys doing dev work, or, enabling the devs. And the reality is the developer wants to move twice as fast. They can't become experts in operations domains. So in continuation of the stack being progressively SaaSified, we need to be able to, on this frontier, which Duplo is attacking and people should be looking at attacking, is we need to be able to deliver sort of turnkey in-a-box platform ops for devs, so that devs can begin to automate, engage, and drive those repetitive operations tasks on their own. Effectively, we're moving to a place where this is one layer that will get us that much closer to being able to have platform ops or DevOps in a box. Did I get that right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
And there is a lot of role for the DevOps to play, right? For example, I mean, a lot of security, the compliance, a lot of administrative policies, quotas, cost management. There are a boatload of things that I think DevOps engineers have to do. All I'm trying to say is that DevOps engineers don't have to be in line for every deployment that the developers want to be. Like if they want to create a service, they don't need to go and talk to a DevOps engineer, but DevOps engineer can put the right guardrails so that when the service is created, it does not violate policies and so forth. That's where I see the role of like DevOps and developers to work in conjunction with each other.
Makes perfect sense. Jim?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Venkat, for being here. And if you don't mind sticking around, we're going to transition to Q&A now with you. For everyone who's watching the recorded version of this on YouTube, this is where we leave you. So thank you for being here for today's Dogcast. And we'll put a QR somewhere on the screen for you to join the mailing list as well if you'd like to attend any of these live recordings. And we'll see all of you on the next one.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for the whiskey.
Yep, no problem. See you guys.
To the podcasting, grab your headphones. Let's jam to the beats of a NADOG summer. NADOG summer. With Brian and Jim on the mic. Yes, drop knowledge, pure delight. DevOps chatter, turn the volume high. Brian and Jim bringing summer vibes.